Good afternoon and welcome to Ethical Corporation's webinar on how to show the true value of your impact through your reporting activities. I'm Ed Long, Project Director at Ethical Corporation, and I will be moderating today's webinar. This webinar is part of the Knowledge Exchange in the run-up to the Sustainability Reporting and Communications Summit in London on 17th and 18th of October. Today's webinar was one of the most mentioned challenges highlighted in our research phase for the event. That is both a challenge but also offers great opportunities for companies. Today we will look to discuss a few of the key areas around impact reporting. How to convey non-financial data as if they were financial, how to quantify your environmental and social economics to demonstrate positive impact, and how to treat sustainability data as rigorously as financial and reach reasonable assurance. Today joining us we have Claudine Blamey, who's the Head of Sustainability and Stewardship at the Crown Estate, Christian Heller from Sustainability Strategy at BASF, Maurice Luschada, Head of Sustainability Strategy and Reporting at Philips Lighting, and last but not least, Mark Goff, Executive Director at Natural Capital Coalition. Today's 1 hour webinar will be a focused discussion where the speakers will be sharing best practice and lessons learned of the work they've undertaken in the area of impact reporting. As well as with Ethical Corporation's webinars, it will be highly interactive, so I do encourage you to get involved. Of the 600 plus signed up today for today's webinar, who are already signed in and expecting, we're really expecting a lot of interaction. So there will be 4 questions for yourselves, and please do post your key questions throughout the discussion as well. We'll be looking to answer as many as we can throughout the next 60 minutes, and if we don't, we'll follow on after the webinar as well and try and get those questions answered for you. They can be submitted via the comments box and via Twitter using the Twitter handle SRCEU. Please do get involved. To start off with, I have a question for you in the audience in the form of a poll. The question is, do you feel you're measuring your negative and positive impacts? So countdown for the answers. 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Quite a resounding no on that one. So we're looking at 70% of those who have voted saying no. So useful webinar, useful hour going to be coming to the head. With that, I'd like to go to Claudine with the first question. So Claudine, in your experience, what have been the biggest challenges of defining and reporting true value and impact of sustainability initiatives?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. There have been many, many challenges, but I thought I'd pull out 3. So challenge number 1 has been data. Understanding the reliability of data has been an issue in terms of, so in some cases we've had to use data where it's national averages, and then understanding what that means in terms of how do you interpret that then to be able to make decisions off the back of that for the business. The second thing is that making sure what you're measuring is the impact and not the input. I think sometimes people get confused, particularly if you're sort of doing it day in and day out and you go, well, are we really measuring the right thing? And keep challenging yourself to do that. That's definitely been one of our challenges. I think the biggest challenge, which is my third point, is around winning over internal colleagues with the metrics and for them to understand how to use the metrics, enable them to make better decisions and fuller decisions. Part of that was my first challenge, which is the reliability of data, and getting them comfortable that they can rely on the data to make decisions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your insights, Claudine. So I was hoping just to start that across to yourself as well, Mark. Because I know previously you've worked with Claudine in terms of the monetizing sustainability work that the Crown Estate are so well known for in the industry. I just had the question of when we were looking at researching the conference itself and looking into this area, what was coming back time and time again, Mark, was that social impacts are really difficult to quantify. And I wanted to put to you, why would you agree? And if so, why is that the case?
Thanks, Ed. And this is an interesting one because the people involved in the natural capital community do tend to say, oh, social is going to be a lot harder. And I've spoken to a lot of the people that are starting to develop the social capital protocol and the work there. And they're all saying, oh, no, 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 the natural is a lot harder. So I think it does depend on your perspective and where you are and what you're used to. I think the most important thing about it is, though, is that, as Claudine was saying, it's all got to be connected. You've got to look at the total story that's happening and not just try and pick things off. One of the things, the key things that capitals provides us with is a way of thinking of trade-offs, a way of thinking of how do things connect, the systems, and that has to include the social, the human, all of the different capitals as well as natural. One of the reasons we started the Natural Capital Coalition, bringing together the natural work, was because there has been a lot more development, I think, in many ways around, you know, being able to count something for a start. That helps. You know, count the number of trees you have or the amount of water you're using. That's a good starting point, the measurement. And there've been lots of work around the valuation. But I think definitely going forward, we need to see this as an integrated whole. And the work we've been doing more recently through several organisations in the coalition on things such as London parks, and very clearly linked through to the health benefits of those. So the connections between social and natural, I think sometimes are forced, and actually it's about how they connect is the most important thing.
Thanks for that, Mark. On the same front as well, we had a colleague of Christian Sturck presenting at RBS Europe, our flagship conference, which took place earlier on this month, and he was discussing BASF's really innovative approach to measuring social impacts. So Christian, I was wondering, how did this model come about, and how are you looking to scale this up?
So this is Christian speaking. Welcome to everybody. So we started this process, what we are calling our value to society approach, about 5 years ago. And it came up in the end by the release of our latest corporate strategy, which is including a corporate purpose saying we create chemistry for a sustainable future. And immediately in the end, stakeholders in our board of directors asked the sustainability department, what the hell is this contribution, what we make to a sustainable future, and what is our real contribution here? And we came up with the idea that we are paying dividends for our shareholders and asked ourselves, do we in any way pay a social or an environmental dividend to our stakeholders, like the society or like the environment? And we immediately entered the overall concepts, call them footprinting, call them capital assessment, call them integrated or environmental or social profit and loss statements and accounting. So we were running down this pathway for more than 4 years now, and we have developed up until today a corporate model which is covering economic, social, and environmental capitals along our more or less complete value chain. When I'm saying more or less complete value chain, what we can cover comprehensively at the corporate level is the production cycle of a product. This means we can't include for the time being the use phase and end of life. Just to one of the points Claudine mentioned before, it's about data availability. And the people who know chemical companies, so we have more than 60,000 products in the market, and it's just impossible for the time being to have data for all these impacts in the use phase available. But on the other hand, we are quite convinced that we have a good and comprehensive model in place which allows us a much better and tangible communication, a new way of a materiality assessment, and we are able to monitor progress over time with regards to our contribution to sustainability. And when you're asking the question about how do we scale this thing up, so first of all, I would say we are now on the way, let's say, internally about downscaling, meaning from the corporate level down to project assessment and product evaluations. And if I'm looking at, let's say, upscaling, so we are quite engaged in various initiatives heading in the end for best practice exchange, the operationalization of impact valuation, and also the convergence of various methodologies, data, and valuation coefficients in place. For example, talking about the World Business Council, Natural Capital Coalition, or also the Impact Valuation Roundtable.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that, Christian. Just a quick reference to the attendees who are currently listening live. We have had a couple of questions come in so far, so please do keep on sending them through. We'd very much appreciate your thoughts on what's being said today, and we can get your questions and your questions answered within the hour to our expert speaker panel. I guess when you're what I'd like to do there, Mark was discussing how the link of the social and the natural, there's a need to be looked at in a similar vein and on the same respect. Christian, are you of the same opinion? Are you what Mark's coming across in terms of what the work he's doing? Is that something that you're looking to do at BASF?
I fully support in the end what Mark was saying, because if you're looking into the results and if you're able to run these calculations over time, so you immediately see how certain business decisions, in our case with regards to, let's say, portfolio shifts and with regard to volume growth aspects, changing the different capitals you are assessing and how they're independent with each other. So what we are doing is using a monetary value for social, environmental, and economic impact, and to have a look and understand these interdependencies based on decision-making within the company is definitely providing additional and beneficial information for us to, in the end, have a more robust business in place.
Excellent. I mean, well, you mentioned something there when you're looking at monetizing. So, one key question that we've got is that when you're looking at what the business value of monetizing, I guess when you're looking at monetizing rather than quantifying your impacts, what's that business value looking beyond not just value for, say, investors? Would you say, Maurice? I'd kind of like to bring you in here because I've obviously asked a couple of questions to everyone else. So, Maurice, I wondered what your thoughts were on what's the business value of monetizing versus quantifying your social and environmental impact?
Yeah, hi everybody. Maurice Loosgilde, working for Philips Lighting. I think that's a good question. I think monetizing helps to make a transition from being a purely sustainability commitment, sustainability KPI, transferring it more into a business KPI. So, as Claudine already explained, it's sometimes pretty difficult also to convince internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders about the importance of these metrics, and monetization of these metrics definitely help. So for our company, it definitely helped also to bring in life cycle assessments to see where we have the biggest impact, and then choose these KPIs to start with your monetization.
Excellent. I don't know if any of the other panelists have any thoughts on the question that was just posed to Maurice in terms of the business value of monetizing. I know, obviously, Claudine, the Crown Estate's done quite a lot of work in this area. What your thoughts were on that question?
Yeah, sure. So within the total contribution methodology, which looks at both negative and positive impacts on all the capitals that our business depends on, we have decided to go down the monetization route for all the different metrics, for which there are 63 at the moment. I think monetization provides a common language. That's one benefit. But I think more importantly, going forward, if we are going to start really incorporating these values into our accounts, then they have to be monetized, because they will never get there otherwise. It's hard enough, I think, trying to persuade the accounting world that you can add these things up, because at the moment the argument is that they're apples and pears and you can't add up the different capitals together. So there's a lot of convincing to do there, but I think if it wasn't monetized, that argument would be even harder.
Ed, can I just jump in as well? This is Mark here.
Sure.
I think it's important that we recognize the difference between valuation and monetization, and that about half of the pilots that we've done so far around natural capital have used monetization, and monetization is really good for capex decisions, for investment decisions, when looking, as Claudine was saying, at comparing, and when you're looking at a total or net impact approach. But the key thing when you're trying to think about the capitals, for us at least, is that when you use valuation, you use it to understand the relative importance and worth of something to you. And it's only when you understand that worth, what it is worth to you, and worth doesn't have to be money. There's lots of different ways you can understand the worth, the value. When you understand it, then you make a change in your decisions. So for us, it's very much around how can you inform those decisions? Because just having some nice numbers and things doesn't actually change anything. It's only when we move away from just measuring things to valuing them. And that one form of valuation is monetization, but you can have quantified valuation and qualified valuation as well. So only when you move away to that and really understand what it means to you. So for example, air emissions, number of air emissions is a number. Understanding the health implications of those air emissions, that's when you start getting change in the boardroom. That's when you start getting people making differences on the ground. So the most important thing isn't whether it's a number or not, it's whether you've got the right information to inform a decision, I would argue.
And just, this is Christian speaking, just to support Mark in this regard, I think the whole notion about impact valuation is really getting more knowledge how you're impacting the health and life and well-being of people. And this is shifting in the end the perspective on the company from, let's say, purely economic accounting perspective to a more macro level perspective on the company performance. And this definitely triggers quite intense discussions within companies up to the board level, especially if you put a monetary value behind that, because you can easily see how your impact on the health and well-being of people might in the future hit your financial bottom line if you're talking about the internalization of externalities, for example.
Excellent. Well, we've just had a quite relevant question come through from Chris Rickaby. He's posed the question: how do you convert air emissions into monetary terms? I'll ask that to Maurice. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that is a very important one. So, for example, if we, as I just explained for Philips Lighting, if we look at the life cycle assessment of a product, then over 90% of the impact of a Philips Lighting product is in the use phase. So we started in monetizing. So that was the first thing to monetize, to see what the monetization is of the saved impact of the carbon emissions of our products in the use phase. So we, as part of the global lighting challenge, we committed as a company to sell 2 billion LED bulbs by 2020. So what we did there was basically look at market penetration, see where what comparable bases are, and then monetize it via shadow price to see what the impact is of the carbon emission of our products. So that is an example of how we monetized or tried to monetize our biggest impact from our emissions.
And Mark, as well, I'd like to pose that question. Oh, go on. Sorry, Claudine, if you'd like to jump in.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in there. Actually, on the Crown Estate website, we have in detail put the methodologies of total contribution and all the different metrics, and that does explain how everything is measured and monetized, etc. So if anyone's really interested, please do have a look.
Excellent. Thanks, Claudine. I was hoping as well, Mark, your thoughts as well on how you convert air emissions into monetary terms.
I mean, there's plenty different types of valuation approaches. A lot of them are explained through the Natural Capital Protocol, and there's a lot more guidance on the Natural Capital Hub, which we've got, which now has over 1,000 different pieces of information on it around natural capital and the different approaches that people are taking. I think, once again, it comes back down to the valuation approach you use depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if you are looking to inform an internal business decision, that's going to be very different than if you're looking at stakeholder engagement. An example might be carbon pricing. For internal carbon pricing, you might use the European trading price, 3 to 4 euros. If you're looking at the social value of natural capital, you'll probably use the 29 euros figure. And there's plenty of other figures out there as well. And the valuation technique you use will depend upon that. I think the key thing, though, as Claudine was just saying there, and we do seem to all be agreeing with each other a lot on this webinar at the moment, but I think the key thing there is about having those methodologies open so that people can share and build upon that experience. And one of the things that happened through the development of the protocol process was that both Kering and PwC both opened up their approaches as we were developing the protocol to make them accessible to other people. And I think that that's really important as we continue to learn, particularly with that data question that Claudine raised at the beginning. Every single person that's been applying the work that we've been doing has raised data as an issue. And we need to think about data in a different way, because previously, most businesses, data is a proprietary issue. You go to your supply chain, you find out what they're doing, and you put it into your internal system. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about the costs and benefits that go beyond the boundaries of that organization. And sometimes you're gaining benefit from someone else's cost and vice versa. So we need to have access to information that goes across those boundaries, and that means an open data system, which is going to be very complicated, I think, as we go on, particularly as some companies have invested a lot of money in understanding this. How do we open up those systems in a fair and just way to make sure that people have that information and access to it?
Excellent. Thanks for your insight there, Mark. I'm just going to ask another question that's come through from our listeners, and then go back to a couple of the questions that we're hoping to get answered today. There's a question come through from Jack Lloyd on looking at how do you assess what your organisation can legitimately claim as a positive impact when those impacts occur upstream or they occur downstream of your value chain. Christian, I'd like to bring you in here if you've got any thoughts on Jack's question.
Yeah, so this is one of the most challenging questions, I would say. In the end, what kind of impact can you attribute back to your company, especially if you're talking upstream and downstream? So for the chemical industry, in the end, we are quite used to this question because we are always talking about what kind of impact or contribution we are enabling along the value chain. But nevertheless, with regards to the notion of impact valuation, you have a different, in the end, level playing field on that piece, because you're sourcing certain impacts or inputs for your own production side, so you can easily say, okay, I'm somehow causing effects at my first-tier suppliers or business partners due to my purchase or procurement. But what's up with your tier 2 to tier N supply chain? Are you responsible for that or not? Or can you attribute the impact over there back to your company? And the same goes in the downstream piece. So, for example, if we as BASF are selling our products in the automotive industry, and in the end, you as an end consumer are able to drive a car, so what in the end is the contribution of BASF to drive that car? Is that in the end attributed back to us via financial terms, via, let's say, kilograms of product in the car, or what in the end is the criteria you're going to apply? And at least to my knowledge, this is really a quite open field, and we have no standards for that piece with regard to impact valuation currently in place, which are in the end accepted by all the stakeholders. So this is still an open discussion here.
Do you, on that front, do you reckon there should be a standards for this, Christian?
So at least what we are talking about within companies, we are definitely looking for convergence and standardization in that regard, because these techniques and methodologies out there are so new, and there's, let's say, the maturity level is so low for the time being that standardization would definitely help with regard to building trust internally and externally. And all these aspects with regard to what impact you are really responsible for, or what impact you can attribute to yourself, or when does an impact turn positive or negative, if, for example, if you're talking about wages. So this is really about having a better level playing field, and you can easily call that standardization.
Thanks for that, Christian. I'd just like to open that up to everyone else on the panel today. If they've got any thoughts on the question just asked in terms of should there be a standardization.
I'll comment on that. I'm not sure if it's standardization or it's just another way of looking at how we as an organization, what part of that can we have an effect on? And I think a good example of this that we seem to be all getting right is going down the route of science-based targets on carbon. I think being able to set now science-based targets that we know if we go down that route, we will be contributing to the lowering of the 2 degrees, then we ought to be able to adopt the same sort of targets for other impacts as well. And I would say if we were to have a sort of a global conversation, that ought to be the global conversation we start having around this.
Yeah, I fully agree with Claudine there. I'm not sure whether standardization would be the right direction. I think indeed that every company needs to, at least for themselves, know where they are in the value chain, what their impact is both upstream and downstream, and then make very conscious choices on where to bring in your impact and where to limit your impact. Work with your suppliers upstream, work on your products downstream. But I don't think standardization would be the right approach in this sense.
This is Mark here. Obviously, ISO has already started work on a 14007 and 14008, 2 new initiatives based around some of the valuation approaches. So there is work going on already to look at standardization there. The work that we've done is very much more about harmonization, so bringing together all the different approaches and all the different people that have been involved in that field, 38 organizations came together to create the protocol based around their experience of what they had been doing in the past to create one overarching umbrella framework that would be appropriate to all of the work they're doing. So I think it is slowly building towards more standardization. I think the commonality of approach that actually underpinning all of this, we're all using the same sort of things anyway, but the commonality of approach is important for consistency, particularly with the more recent work we're doing with the finance sector. So when they start to aggregate things up into a portfolio level, having something that's comparable is very important. That's very difficult to do at the moment because everyone, quite rightly I think, is trying to use these tools and these approaches to understand the decisions and the things that they have to do. But at some point we are going to have to move towards more standardization.
Excellent. Thank you for the insight there. I'm going to go to Claudine here on a slightly different topic. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier working with accounting, and obviously increasingly financial reporting teams seem to be playing a bit more of a key role in non-financial or sustainability data. Claudine, I know from discussions that your CFO was quite heavily involved. I don't know if you could potentially talk us through the process with regard to your accounting team and what the key functions that they performed in their role.
Sure. I think sort of the story starts initially with our previous CFO, who was very, very interested in this area, and he really championed it. And when Mark was here and started the whole process, that's sort of where it all started. And it started with us being able to demonstrate, wanting to demonstrate our wider value to the UK economy. We've sort of evolved it quite a bit since then, and we have a new CFO. And I think more importantly, we have a very clear purpose for the organization. We have a purpose to create brilliant places, and that's what we're in the business to do. There is no way we can evidence that we're creating brilliant places just saying by how much profit we've created. We've got to be able to show it through different values that we've created in order to do that. So this really talks to our purpose, and therefore it's easier to be able to then say to the finance team, guys, you've got to take this on board and you've got to take the metrics on board to be able to demonstrate that through our reporting. So we've half won that argument, and we are in the process of handing over all the total contribution metrics over to finance. So finance will be collecting the data and they'll be reporting on it, some of it on a quarterly basis and some of it definitely on an annual basis. More of it is starting to trickle into the integrated report, and our 5th integrated report was launched today with our results, and it has a few of the total contribution metrics in there. So that's definitely a step forward, and I can see us building more and more going forward, particularly with finance having the data at their fingertips. I think the other thing that adds to that is actually their rigor that they want to put around the metrics really helps. It really helps with the internal selling case, but also really helps to say, actually, it's finance who've got hold of this. This stuff is going to be combed through into real sort of fine detail so that there is more and more confidence built into it as a result.
Well, firstly, Claudine, congratulations on the publishment of your report. And I think that brings a nice segue as well. So a question I'd like to pose to you, Christian, is does impact measurement automatically lead to stronger integration of sustainability? And at the end of that, does it lead to an integrated report?
So as we had an integrated report already in place, from our perspective, I can't really answer this question. But I can give you an answer on the first one. So coming back to one of the key notions, what was already given before, impact valuation using monetary values is in the end using business language. And using the business language opens the doors to, in the end, key decision bodies within the company, be it the C-suite, be it the financial and accounting people. And if they are starting to understand the relevance of, don't call them non-financials, call them pre-financial indicators, then we are really starting also to think, how am I going to embed environmental and social capital into my own decision-making processes? And I think this route is something which all companies will go when we're starting to implement impact valuation within the companies, because other departments beyond the sustainability ones are starting to listen and starting to think, what is the impact, what it has, in the end also on my financial bottom line as a company. And using, in the end, social and environmental capital in your own decision-making processes necessarily leads to more, let's say, integrated thinking within your company. If that necessarily ends up with an integrated report, honestly, I can't chat on that one.
Excellent. I don't know if any of the other panelists have any thoughts on if impact measurement automatically leads to stronger integration of sustainability, and then at the end, that integrated report.
Yeah, I can add to that. I definitely think that it is a great tool to link the non-financial performance closer to the financial performance of the company, both from a KPI point of view as well as from an internal stakeholder point of view. Especially if you require a high level of assurance on your data, then I think if you monetize your impact, it can bring the financial folks also closer to the sustainability folks by streamlining your data validation processes. So I think it's definitely a tool to a more integrated report, and I think it's also a great tool to connect your sustainability commitments, your sustainability reporting to your company purpose. So I definitely see it as a great tool towards an integrated report.
This is Mark here again. The International Integrated Reporting Council, the IRRC, and us have a statement which we put out a year or so ago now about how, if you're looking to do integration, then you do need to think about how you would make those decisions that you will then be reporting. So you need to think about the capitals, and capitals is a key part of the integrated reporting movement. We've also, though, more recently been running workshops with them in Abu Dhabi and various other places around the world, and linking up many of the different things we do. So there's one cohesive approach to this. So it isn't seen to be separate things. That actually, if you are going to look at natural capital, it's likely to lead to more integration within your business, and therefore you're likely to think more about how you might tell that story, and the integrated reporting framework is a good way of doing that. So there are a lot of connections already between the different organizations that are helping to influence and convene this.
Okay, excellent. So one topic that does seem to be bandied around a lot quite at the moment, well, in sustainability in general and in reporting, is the SDGs. And if I take a question that we've just had come in from a member of the audience, is looking at the SDGs, and will they help generate the conversation around contribution to impacts by organisations, which I believe was which Claudine alluded to a little bit earlier on. Christian, I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of the SDGs and how they there to help and generate that conversation about impacts and measurement.
So I think the SDGs are quite helpful with regard to aligning the different, let's say, content and impact categories we are working on, because as the SDGs are in the end setting the global socio-political goals for our societies, they're really quite helpful with regard to aligning the stuff what we are doing here.
Excellent. Has any of the other panelists at all got any thoughts on the role of the SDGs within reporting and how they move on in terms of a communications tool and as in terms of their contribution to generating that conversation regarding impacts?
I think this is Mark again. Go on, Claudine. You go next.
I was just going to say, I think what SDGs have done is raised a huge amount of awareness in possibly sectors and organisations that weren't really aware or playing any part in sustainability before. I think it's also driving a bit of innovation around impact measurement. So there are all sorts of groups popping up to be able to measure worldwide, and what I was talking about before, globally, the impacts and what different sectors need to do to be able to contribute to the reduction of that particular negative impact. So I think that's driving that. So it is driving a bit of innovation around that.
Do you know any specific examples, Claudine, in terms of the innovation you're discussing?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but I mean, there's some of the social capital protocol stuff. It is starting to, I mean, it came out almost of, well, we've got to do this as worldwide in terms of we've got to meet the SDG goals. Mark's obviously working on the natural side, but there was a gap on the social, and I'm not sure it would have come about if it wasn't all the focus on the SDGs.
Mark, I don't know if you want to jump in here at all.
Yes, thanks, Ed. I think the SDGs, as we were just hearing, set out a very clear position that the world governments want to achieve. Now, governments only have certain things that they can do. They can convene, they can encourage, they can set incentives, but more likely they set regulation or taxation or various other things to try and make sure these are achieved. And as Ban Ki-moon said when they were launched, this isn't a framework for business, this is a framework for governments. But business is going to play a very, very important role in being able to deliver these. Unfortunately, what I've seen so far, and I think it's very early days, is that a lot of businesses are just aligning their existing programs to a couple of the SDGs and trying to work out how these two things connect. Good starting place. But the key thing for me about the SDGs is it's so comprehensive. And I know people joke around the 169 targets and 17 goals and all of this, but it is comprehensive. It does cover a very comprehensive and systematic approach to what we need to do for the planet. And one of the most important things is how do those things connect? So we've been doing lots of games with people about, which is the SDG you connect with most. and then swapping that for something else within your business. So if your business has got your purpose and is running towards it, what happens if you put hunger or poverty or gender equality in the middle of your business model? How does that change the business model? And that's really interesting because you do depend upon them all. I think the key thing from a capital's point of view is if we've got this vision, which is brilliant to have this, really for the first time, all of the governments in the world, bar a few, aiming towards this one place where they want to have this sustainable planet. What they be able to do that, you need something like capital as a very practical approach to actually put it into your business, to make sense of it, to be able to get there. Because it's very hard sometimes with these broader things that we're aiming for, like the goals, to really make that stick on the ground. So I think they're excellent. I think we do, like I say, do an awful lot of work with organizations around the connections between capitals and SDGs, and particularly the route with capitals looking at impact and dependency, and your dependency upon things. That's when the SDGs really comes in, that actually we can't have really good functioning businesses without gender equality, without no hunger, etc., and all of things like that. They may not be core to your business model, but you do have a dependency on all of those. And that for me, I think, is where this raises the agenda.
Yeah, so I agree with Mark. I think all of them are a great tool to indeed also set your strategy instead of having an existing strategy and see how they map to the SDGs. So for Philips Lighting, when we designed our sustainability 5-year program, we basically took the SCGs as a starting point to see, are we committing to the right things? What we're doing, is that in line with what the globe needs, what the people need? So for us, it was really like a starting point for our sustainability strategy, and we're not really using it as a communications tool. I think it's not designed as a communications tool, but more as a starting point in your strategy. This should be the heart of your activities.
Excellent. So, on a friend, I'm just going to take a question that we've had come through from the audience, which might take us back slightly, but it loops quite nicely into the next question, which I'm hoping to discuss before the webinar finishes today. So, we were talking earlier about monetization, and it was largely as an internal management tool. Were any of the panel being asked for financial values by clients, or have financial values really been used or are really useful for you when you're speaking to clients and looking on an external basis? And that's to Christian. Christian?
So, Christian, I'll try to take this one up. So I would differentiate a little bit, because I would say with regards to, let's say, monetizing your impact, you have something like an expert audience which is really interested in the topic and see the potential, using these kinds of metrics in the end to drive sustainable business and sustainable growth within companies. On the other hand, I would say beyond these experts, not many stakeholders really aware, and especially not really understanding what impact valuation is about. Our experience with BASF is that this is currently a bit shifting, especially with regards to the financial market. So what we receive in the end is more and more questions from our mainstream investors and from insurance companies about the methodologies we are applying and how we are using the results of our model with regards to risk mitigation and business opportunity finding topics. But I would say we are really in early stages here in this debate, and to see how this will be received from our stakeholders.
Excellent. And I think it links quite nicely as well. I know when we originally had a conversation, Maurice, a couple of months ago, we were just discussing the great work you've been doing in terms of your assurance and how you've reached reasonable assurance. So I was looking to pose a question to you, Maurice, in terms of what were the key challenges you faced with reaching reasonable assurance on your sustainability data, and how did you go about mitigating these challenges?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ed. As you might know, we are now an independent company as Philips Lighting for a bit over 1 year. So as part of being Royal Philips, we already have a few years of experience with achieving reasonable assurance on our integrated report. So this is basically the first year, February this year, when we issued our own Philips Lighting annual report, that we also continued with this ambition to obtain reasonable assurance. And for me, three things are basically key in achieving reasonable assurance. The first one has already been mentioned by Claudine, is high quality data. I think success of reasonable assurance fully depends on high quality data. Second one is having a robust process in place of data collection and data validation process. And the third one is competencies. So for us, the process starts in the sites. So reporting all their environmental impact into the tools will be done locally in the sites. So they report basically all their invoices in our software tool, and then do already a first validation round. Then secondly, we have centrally some people in place who are also validating these data to make sure that the data in the system is exactly compared to the invoices. And then finally, we do take our auditors to the sites to see, to show them basically that what we report is in line with what they see in the sites. So basically, having this process, a very robust data validation and collection process, together with the data, are basically the two cornerstones of these of our reasonable assurance. And then finally, it's of course about competencies. So making sure that you have the right people with the right competencies in these processes. So for example, if you would, on these positions, we really chose to have people in place with a very data-minded background. So to make sure that we, in contrast to most of the 100% sustainability professionals, these are more of a financial profile, to make sure that they have the affinity with data, with first time right, with setting these very robust processes. So basically data, processes, and competencies were for us the three key success factors.
Excellent. Thanks for running through that, Maurice. I don't know, Mark, on the front of reasonable assurance and non-financial data, what your take on how companies reach this level of assurance, and how they tackle the challenges that they're facing with doing so?
I think this is a difficult area, and I don't think we're there yet, to be honest. I think we're still trying to understand what we might do around assurance, around the external disclosure piece. We're working with all of the majors, SASB, CDSB, IRRC, GRI, etc., around what that might be around the natural capital space. But for us, our focus at the moment still very much is around that decision making. So it is around internal disclosure and getting that bit right first. I think the mistake we've often made in the sustainability circles is thinking that if we disclose and if we're transparent, we've solved the problem. And actually that doesn't always work, obviously. So our focus has been very much on that internal decision-making processes. If we get that bit right, I think then it naturally follows that you can then tell the story. And if you're telling the story in a fair and a just way, then assurance around that is possible. I think the problem is if you're trying to fit it into a box or do a tick box exercise or something like that with this, that is very, very difficult because we don't actually have the relevant indicators and things in place yet. So to me, you've got to start in the beginning, and the beginning has to be about what is it you're trying to inform, where's the information that you need to collect that information, inform the decision, make those changes to your business model, then try and tell the story. It is iterative, and once you've told that then can drive more change, but I think we've got to be starting at the decision-making piece, and then the assurance and things comes from that.
Excellent. Just a note for our attendees. We're coming up towards the end. We've got a couple of minutes left, so we're going to try and get a couple more questions asked. If you have any questions that you're looking to get answered before the end of the webinar, please do ping them across now, and we'll try best to get those across to our panelists before the webinar finishes today. I've got a question that I was looking to aim at yourself, Claudine. So when you're looking at monetized impact, did you ever find that did you ever face the issue that one monetized impact was extremely higher than the others? And yeah, that's the question for you, Claudine.
I think we've gone through various iterations, and I think what's important to say is it's not whether one's higher than any others or lower. I think where it becomes really useful, and this data and these metrics, shows a trend. So once you've set your baseline and you've got what you've done in that particular year, then once you start to see the trends, you can then see whether something's changed. And then you can start asking questions. And that's when it becomes a useful tool for decision making. Because otherwise, you've just got a figure, and the different capitals are so different that you might have a massive figure on one and not on another on a particular metric. But that doesn't really mean anything at all. It's not, because the interdependencies, as we talked about before, is not really happening at the moment. So we're taking each capital very separate. So in that sense, it's more the trends that really matter and not necessarily the sort of independent figures. And just to mention that last couple of months ago, there was a session in Amsterdam run by Reporting 3.0, and it triggered this in my mind because that's what came up there as well. And the participants on the panel were very much in agreement about the fact that we've got to look at the trends rather than, at this stage, rather than take every figure and every metric read in terms of, wow, its accuracy and the accuracy of the data.
Thanks, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Christian. This will be the summing up of the webinar. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Christian?
So I'm fully supporting Claudine with this argumentation, because looking at the different valuation techniques and models out there, so the results are so different. For example, within the Impact Valuation Roundtable, we established something like a dummy company and applied the valuation coefficients of 5, let's say, leading companies in this regard. And we had differences in the results on within indicators by the factor of 1,700. So you can easily see that a comparison and sticking to concrete results or figures for the time being is not giving you any kind of an informative value. But I fully support Claudine. If you have set up your metrics internally within the company, and if you're running your calculations year by year, you definitely see trends. And this trend is, I think, something what really gives you an informative value about your business operations, about your business activities, that you definitely can work on.
Okay, excellent, guys. I'm going to wrap up the webinar now. So we've had some really great insight. We've had some excellent questions that have come through as well. I know quite a lot of them haven't been able to we haven't been able to go through, but we will take those and hopefully get those answered in the next couple of weeks for you. There were some great things mentioned across the whole webinar, but a couple of things that stood out to myself was when you're just as a couple of key takeaways. When you're looking to monetize, monetizing helps transition from, say, sustainability KPIs to business KPIs. So it helps engage and convince both internal and external stakeholders of the value of the initiatives. Claudine was mentioning how to have really open methodologies, make it really accessible to others so that everyone can learn, and ensure that the data is robust. And on the front of the SDGs, they're helping contextualize everyone's impacts. So they've helped to raise awareness and they're driving innovation around impact measurement. And lastly, and so Yeah, in any case, I'd just like to thank everyone who's listened today. I'd like to thank Maurice, Claudine, Mark, and Christian for your insights today on today's topics. And if you do have any burning questions that you haven't had answered, you please do email me at ed.long@ethicalcorp.com, and I'll try and get these answered for you. If I could just point you in the direction of your screen, you should see a slide right now with further information on the Sustainability Reporting and Communications Summit, which is taking place in October on the 17th and 18th in London. Hope to see you all there. And once again, thanks to today's speakers for their insights. The recordings as well of today's webinar will be sent out to you in the next couple of weeks, so look out for my email. And again, thanks to Maurice, Claudine, Mark, and Christian for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.